In this week's material, we'll be discussing implementing page layout using HTML and cascading style sheets. As part of this discussion, we're going to talk about the idea of a box model. And a box model is this kind of imaginary rectangle that forms around any element on a page. And so let's just say that this navigation bar that goes from home all the way to the right to direction is actually an element. Well, it means there's a box, and again, it's an imaginary rectangle that goes from the upper left corner of the element to the lower right. And here you can naturally see a box because we happen to have some colored background. But in fact, even items where you can't see a box on the page actually do have a box. This About Us text, you could say that there's a box here. Again, extending from the upper left corner of the element to the lower right. So there are things that you can do with this box, and some of the attributes include things like a border, and that's discussed on page 186 and 187 of your textbook. In addition to the border, there's also padding, and there's also margins. You really need to make sure you review that information on 186 and 187 so you have some idea how the margins, the border, and the padding work in relation to the box model. We're going to go ahead and start the exercise on page 188, and the one that continues on to 189. As you see in front of you, you have a page similar to what we've been working on related to the bed and breakfast. In this exercise, we're actually going to take what you see on your page here and make it look similar to what you see on page 189, figure H4. Now, I'm going to assume you've already done those steps, and that was step 1. And then we're going to go down to step 2, and I'm going to pull up the cascading style sheet, and I'm going to add right under the font face rule a new rule as outlined in your book, and it gives you several different selectors that we need to add. We start with article, and then we go on to the body, DD, div, and again, these are all selector elements that are going to be defined by this rule. And we're going to go on from div and do DL, T, fig caption, the whole list of them here, footer, H1, H2, H3. And remember, a selector means that anything in this list will be impacted by the rule that we're going to write in just a moment. We're asked to set the margin and the padding to 0. If you look on page 189, there's actually a figure at the top of the page that will show you how to do this, but by now you should have some idea how you build these name value rules. It's margin 0, and we'll put a semicolon, and then padding 0. And the reason we do this is because we want to make sure that we override any default border margins or padding that your browsers, that your end users' browsers will put in effect. So we want to set everything to 0, so when we do size things or position things on the page, we're going to have complete control over how that works. In step 3, we actually have to remove a rule, and since this should all be in alphabetical order, it should be pretty easy to find. We're looking for main nav li, and there we are. And the actual name value pair we're supposed to remove is display in line. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And I'm going to save this document. We'll go ahead and look at the page. Now this is the way the page looked before my change. If I reload it, we should see something pretty different in this page, and you'll start to see that it's looking a lot like the figure H4 on page 189. Basically what we've done is we've said this information that now is horizontal, we just want it to show up as a normal list would. Remember, we just changed the rule that was associated with an LI, and an LI is related to a list, and normal lists just go one on top of each other in a vertical fashion. So let's see what happens when we reload this page. Be sure to pay attention to the navigation bar here. There we go. It certainly doesn't look like the new figure on page 189, but we're getting a little closer. So let's go back to the style sheet and complete the next change. On step number 4, we're asked to find the main nav style rule, and that's the one right up here. And we are told that we want to add a name value pair of float left. So go ahead and put that right here at the top. And we need to add width 7 EM. And remove the background. I'm going to save this, go back to the page, and now let's reload it and see what happens. So what we see here now is it's looking even closer to what we'd expect it to be based on figure H4 on page 189. Now let's go back to the style sheet, and we are actually going to be asked to add a new selector. And this is for main nav A. And this is part of step 5. Add text decoration. And the value is going to be none. Save this. Go back to our file. And again, I've said this many times before in this semester, and I want to repeat it. I like to save and view often just to see how things change. It can be a very helpful tool in allowing you to learn the code. But not only that, if you do make an error, it's easy to catch it earlier, hopefully. I'm going to reload the page. Not much difference there. There was a little subtle difference, but let's go back to the style sheet, complete the rest of the exercise, and see what happens next. On step number 6, we're going to go to the content style rule. So I'm going to go up to content right here, and we are going to set the float property to right. And the width to 32 EM. Now, again, if you can look at the code, you may notice this. If not, just kind of intuitively, you may say, well, a content tag may define the core content of the site, and if we're making it float to the right, well, maybe that will make all that content move to the right. Let's see what happens if we save, go back to the page, and reload. And watch this content right here when I press reload. Notice what happens where the content used to wrap around to the bottom of the navigation here. Now it all stays to the right. It floats to the right of the navigation.